There's a horse that changed the face of Greek mythology. Not an ordinary horse, obviously. A horse that was born from a monster's blood, that created a sacred spring with a single hoof strike, that helped a hero kill a three-headed beast, and that ended up becoming a constellation in the sky. We're talking about Pegasus. And what's really crazy is that most people think they know his story. The white-winged horse, flying through the sky, beautiful and free. That's the image we have in our heads. But behind this perfect picture, there's a story that's much darker, much more twisted, and frankly, much more interesting than what you've been told. Today, we're going to start from the beginning, the birth, the adventures, the tragic endings, and we'll also see why, more than 2,000 years later, Pegasus shows up everywhere in our daily lives, whether you realize it or not. Stick around until the end, because the last third of this video, the part about Pegasus's impact on our modern world, is the one that's really going to surprise you. So, to understand Pegasus, you first need to understand his mother, and his mother is Medusa. Yes, that Medusa we all know, the one with snakes for hair and a gaze that turns you to stone. But what a lot of people forget is that Medusa wasn't always a monster. Originally, in the earliest versions of the myth, she was a beautiful young woman with golden hair. The problem is that she got involved in a situation with Poseidon, the god of the sea, and what happened between them took place in Athena's temple. The goddess Athena, furious, didn't punish Poseidon. No, she punished Medusa. She turned her into a monster. That's the kind of divine justice that really makes you reconsider the Greek gods. So here's where Pegasus enters the story. Poseidon, god of the sea, but also god of horses in Greek mythology, had a relationship with Medusa. And when the hero Perseus comes to behead Medusa to complete his quest, looking into his shield to avoid being petrified, something really unexpected happens. From Medusa's severed neck, two beings emerge. The first is Chimera, a giant armed with a golden sword, and the second is Pegasus, a winged horse, white as snow, bursting from his mother's blood, born fully grown, completely formed, ready to fly. Imagine the scene. Perseus beheads the monster. He expects to head home with the head, and there, a winged horse springs from the corpse. It's the kind of plot twist that makes you realize that in Greek mythology, nothing ever goes as planned. And if you want to know more about the story of Perseus and Medusa, you may watch that video, which appears in the upper right, where I tell the whole adventure. And where does the name Pegasus actually come from? The poet Hesiod, one of the first to tell this story around the 8th century BC, gives us an explanation. The name would come from the Greek word pege, which means spring or fountain. And it's not a coincidence, as we'll see very soon, because Pegasus is going to have a very particular relationship with springs. Now there's a question that has divided scholars for centuries. Did Perseus actually ride Pegasus after killing Medusa? In the earliest versions of the myth, the answer is actually no. Perseus flew thanks to Hermes' winged sandals. But in other later versions, Athena would tame Pegasus and give him to Perseus so he could escape Medusa's two sisters, the other Gorgons, who were furious after their sister's death. And in these versions, Perseus rides Pegasus to go save Andromeda, the princess chained to a rock, threatened with being devoured by a sea monster. So there's a direct link between Pegasus's birth and Andromeda's rescue. It's a detail that perfectly illustrates how Greek mythology was never fixed. Ancient poets added, modified, sometimes contradicted each other. And in the end, the myths survived precisely because they reinvented themselves. After the scene with Perseus, Pegasus finds himself on Mount Helicon. That's where the 9 Muses live, the goddesses of art, poetry, and music. And what happens next is one of the most beautiful stories in all of Greek mythology, even though it's often forgotten. The Muses are one day engaged in a singing contest against the Pierides, 9 sisters who claim to be more talented than they are. The contest takes place on Mount Helicon, and the Muses' music is so extraordinary, so powerful, that the mountain itself begins to swell with pleasure. It swells and swells to the point of almost touching the sky. And if it touches the sky, that's going to be a serious cosmic problem. So Poseidon, to avoid catastrophe, sends Pegasus. The winged horse strikes the mountain with his hoof, and in the same instant, the mountain returns to its normal size. But the hoof strike causes a spring to gush forth, a sacred spring, which will be called Hippocrene, which literally means the horse's spring. and this spring will become, according to legend, a fountain of inspiration for all the poets who will come to drink from it. It's a really poetic image in itself, the winged horse who, with a single hoof strike, creates the very source of artistic inspiration. That's why Pegasus has been considered, from antiquity until today, as a symbol of creativity and imagination. He's not just a flying horse, he's the one who gives birth to poetry. If you're enjoying this story so far, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. We're continuing with one of Pegasus's greatest adventures, and honestly, what's coming next is even more intense. Now comes Pegasus's most famous adventure, the one with Bellerophon, and it's the one that has most captured the collective imagination throughout the ages. Bellerophon is a Greek hero, son of the king of Corinth, and like many mythical heroes, his life begins with an injustice. He ends up at King Proetus's place as a guest, and the king's wife, Sthenoboia, falls in love with him. Bellerophon refuses her advances, politely, because he's a good guest. But Sthenoboia, furious at being refused, goes to her husband and accuses Bellerophon of trying to seduce her. It's exactly the opposite of what happened. King Proetus, who doesn't want to kill his guest directly because that would violate the laws of hospitality, sends Bellerophon to his father-in-law Iobates, king of Lycia, with a sealed letter. A letter that says, in essence, to Iobates to kill Bellerophon. The king of Lycia reads the letter and then assigns him a mission supposed to be impossible: kill the Chimera. The Chimera is a monster of absolute terror. It has the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. It breathed fire. It was ravaging the entire region, and no warrior had managed to defeat it. Because how do you fight a fire-breathing monster on foot? You get grilled before you even get close. That's where Pegasus comes into play, and how Bellerophon manages to tame him is really interesting. In the most popular version of the myth, Athena appears to Bellerophon in a dream. She gives him a golden bridle, a divine bit, the only one capable of taming a horse like Pegasus. Bellerophon wakes up. He sacrifices a bull to Poseidon as the goddess had asked him, and he goes to find Pegasus. He finds him drinking at the Pyrene spring near Corinth, and with Athena's golden bridle, he manages to calm him, to bridle him, to tame him. For the first and last time, Pegasus accepts a rider, and what follows is spectacular. Bellerophon mounts Pegasus. They rise into the air, and they swoop down on the Chimera from the sky. The monster has never seen this. No one attacks it from above. Bellerophon hurls his spears at it from Pegasus's back, out of reach of the fire, and he kills the Chimera. It's one of the most famous exploits in all of Greek mythology, but it's not over. After the victory against the Chimera, Iobates assigns him other missions. Bellerophon, still on Pegasus's back, defeats the Amazons by flying above them, out of reach of their arrows. He vanquishes the Solymi, the pirates of Caria, victory after victory. And this is where the tragedy begins, because Bellerophon starts to believe he's no longer a mere mortal. So much success, so much glory. He starts convincing himself that his place is no longer among men. His place, he tells himself, is among the gods, on Mount Olympus. So he mounts Pegasus and begins to ascend toward the sky, and he climbs, and he climbs. And at the highest point of his ascent, Zeus, the king of the gods, doesn't appreciate this at all. A mortal who wants to reach Olympus, it's a direct insult to the divine order. So Zeus sends a gadfly, an insect that stings Pegasus. The winged horse rears violently. Bellerophon loses his balance, and he falls. He falls from very high, and he survives, barely, but he can no longer walk. He can no longer see. He spends the rest of his life broken, blind, wandering. It's the darkest ending possible for a hero. And Pegasus, he continues to climb. He joins Zeus on Olympus as if nothing had happened. The horse doesn't fall. The horse reaches the sky. Once on Olympus, Pegasus becomes Zeus's own horse. The king of the gods entrusts him with an important mission, carrying thunderbolts and lightning. Every time Zeus wants to unleash a storm on Earth, it's Pegasus who transports the celestial thunderbolts. It's an image that deeply marked the Greek mentality. Thunder in the sky isn't just a natural phenomenon. It's Pegasus running through the firmament with his master's lightning bolts. And it's only after years of loyal service to Zeus that the king of the gods decides to reward Pegasus. He transforms him into a constellation. The winged horse ascends close to the sky for real this time, and he stays there for eternity. The constellation Pegasus is today one of the largest constellations in the night sky, the seventh by size. It's particularly visible in autumn in the northern hemisphere. It's composed of a large square of stars representing the horse's body, with additional lines for the head, neck, and legs. And according to legend, the day Zeus transformed Pegasus into a constellation, a single feather fell to earth near the city of Tarsus in present-day Turkey. Pegasus didn't wait to become a constellation to be celebrated. Since antiquity, the Greeks and Romans have represented him everywhere. The first representations of Pegasus on Greek pottery date back to the 7th century BC on Corinthian pieces. The winged horse quickly became a popular motif on coins, particularly those of Corinth in the 6th century BC. Among the Romans, Pegasus became a symbol of immortality. He's found on cameos made of semi-precious stones on floor mosaics. Roman artists never tired of representing Bellerophon and Pegasus in their works. And then came the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Pegasus changed meaning. He became a symbol of wisdom and fame. And then, later, he became the symbol of poetry and inspiration, the one we know today. And here's the part that's going to surprise you. Because Pegasus doesn't just live in history books or in museums. He's everywhere around you. Really? Let's start with cinema. In 1981, the film Clash of the Titans, with Harry Hamlin in the role of Perseus, puts Pegasus at the heart of the story. In this version, Pegasus is a magnificent white horse that Perseus captures and rides to accomplish his quests. Then, in 2010, the remake of the same film comes out with Sam Worthington, and this time, the filmmakers made a bold decision. They made Pegasus black, a choice that sparked debate among fans because in the original mythology, Pegasus is always described as white, but it shows how each generation reinterprets myths in its own way. And then there's Disney. In 1997, the animated film Hercules comes out, and Disney does something interesting. In the classic mythological version, Pegasus isn't linked to Hercules. He's linked to Bellerophon, but Disney decides to make Pegasus Hercules' companion, a gift from Zeus to his son, and it works. Pegasus becomes a character in his own right, with personality, with reactions, almost like a loyal dog, but one that flies. It's a perfect example of how Hollywood takes liberties with myths to create stories that touch the audience. We can also mention Disney's Fantasia, where creatures inspired by Pegasus appear in the pastoral symphony segment, alongside centaurs and unicorns. An entirely fairy tale universe, where Greek mythology becomes a poetic and musical vision. But cinema isn't everything. Think about corporate logos. TriStar Pictures is one of Hollywood's most famous film studios, the one that released, among others, Terminator 2, and its logo is Pegasus, a white horse that takes its wings and flies away. The studio's founder, Victor Kaufman, whose family loved horses, chose Pegasus as a symbol to represent the kind of magic he hoped to create in Hollywood. And then there's Mobil, the major gas brand. Since the 1930s, their symbol has been a red Pegasus, a winged horse launching into the sky. For a fuel brand, it's a really well-chosen symbol, right? The idea of movement, power, elevation. There's even an iconic statue of Pegasus in Dallas, Texas, atop the Magnolia Building, which has become a symbol of the city. And Nike shoes. You may have worn them without knowing it. Nike produced a line of athletic shoes called Air Pegasus, because what better than a winged horse to represent speed and freedom of movement? In video games too, Pegasus is present. In God of War 2, the protagonist Kratos receives a fire Pegasus to traverse the world in search of the fates. In Fire Emblem, Pegasus Knights are a class of fighters mounted on winged horses. And in Age of Mythology, Pegasus appears as a flying reconnaissance unit. And in animated series? In My Little Pony, some of the little ponies are Pegasi, with wings and the ability to fly. Rainbow Dash, one of the main heroines, is a Pegasus. In Saint Seiya, the main character is the Saint of Pegasus. In Sailor Moon, Pegasus is a central character in the season. In short, every time you watch a cartoon with a flying horse, there's a good chance it's a direct or indirect tribute to Greek mythology. And to finish with something really concrete and lesser known, during World War II, the British Army chose Pegasus as the symbol of its paratrooper forces. In 1941, when the British created their new parachute division, they needed an emblem. There was a debate among the officers. Lightning? No. That's too linked to German aesthetics, so they turned to Greek mythology. The image of Bellerophon mounted on Pegasus, a warrior who arrives in battle from the air, is exactly what paratroopers do. The badge was designed by artist Edward Seago at the suggestion of Daphne du Maurier, wife of the commander of the 1st Airborne Division. A light blue badge on a maroon background. This same badge has remained the symbol of British parachute forces to this day, officially reintroduced in 2014 after being temporarily removed. So there you have Pegasus, a horse who was born from a monster's blood, who made the source of all Greek poetry spring forth, who helped a hero kill a three-headed creature, who served the king of the gods, and who ended up becoming an eternal constellation in the night sky. And more than 2,000 years after these tales, we find his image on our cinema screens, on our company logos, on our athletic shoes, on military uniforms. That's what's really fascinating about Greek mythology. These aren't dead stories. They're stories that continue to live, to transform, to adapt. And Pegasus is probably the best example of that. A myth that has crossed the ages without ever losing its power. If you enjoyed this video, share it, comment, tell me what you think. And if you want to know more about Greek mythology, there are other videos on the channel waiting for you.